Welcome to Blacklit Memory. Tonight, we're walking into the hidden veins of the Appalachian wilds, where ridgelines vanish into fog, roots claw at the path, and some hollows carry names no map remembers. In this episode, you'll hear 8 true stories, accounts whispered by those who returned, and left unfinished by those who never did. Every one of them left a mark. These aren't ghost tales, they're memories, warnings, echoes that linger. If you're new here, consider subscribing. And if tonight's stories strike a nerve, share your thoughts in the comments. We read every one. Now, lower the lights, steady your breath, and don't wander off the trail. They say the Appalachian Trail is a straight shot of white blazes, 2,000 miles of paint swipes, guiding you from Georgia to Maine. That's the trick of it. You follow the paint. Don't overthink it. Don't wander. But a few miles past Fontana Dam, I saw one blaze that wasn't on any map. Angled, sharp left, climbing up a ravine, thick with laurel and pine. It looked too fresh, bright and wet against the bark, like someone had just turned their brush. I was 5 days into my section hike, aiming for Damascus before the weather turned. My name's Caleb Martin, 31, out of Asheville. This trip was supposed to be a reset. I'd just lost my job at a gear shop, and the girl I'd been with for 2 years left right after. Said I had a habit of disappearing. Truth is, I've always been more comfortable in a tent than at a dinner table. I used to come out here with my dad when I was a kid. He told me stories around the fire. One in particular about a ranger who claimed the trail sometimes changed on its own, painted blazes going where they shouldn't. I didn't know whether to believe him back then. I still don't. The air had the bite of late October. I passed a young couple from Ohio around noon. Light packs. Laughing too loud. We exchanged the usual greetings. But I pushed ahead. I preferred my own rhythm. There's a kind of mental tunnel you slip into when you hike long distance. Just your steps, your breath, and the next white blaze. But after that odd mark, I kept glancing over my shoulder. There was no one behind me. Still, I swore I heard someone matching my pace. Distant, barely there. A stick snapping when I stopped, silence when I turned. That night I camped near Cody Gap, half a mile off trail where I'd found a flat patch with decent tree cover. Hung my food bag, built a modest fire, let my boots dry by the flame. It was peaceful until something disturbed the silence. Not loud, just off, like breathing, but dragged out, slow. I called out. Nothing. Could have been wind through the brush, could have been a deer, but when I checked my bear hang the next morning, the line had been cut clean, not chewed. Cut. My food bag was gone. I kept north. My GPS app still showed me on trail, but things felt skewed. Blazes appeared farther apart than they should have been. The undergrowth grew denser. I passed a log with a crude carving. Cut trail ahead. Not for you. I stopped, stared at it. The bark was freshly scored. No moss had grown back over it yet. The tone felt personal, like it was meant for someone specific. Me. At noon, I reached a small clearing where someone had obviously camped the night before. Fire pit still warm. 2 sitting logs placed just right, but no trash. No pack straps. Not even a footprint. I circled it twice. Whoever had been here left no trace, which is rare even for veteran hikers. And something about the way the logs faced each other, too close, made me uneasy. I moved on. Around mile marker 193, the terrain dropped into a shallow gorge. The map showed a spring nearby, so I stepped off trail to refill my bottle. I followed the trickle of water down past a moss-covered boulder and crouched to fill my filter. That's when I heard it. Soft humming. A man's voice, maybe. A tune too slow to place. I turned. At first, I didn't see him. The figure blended with the trees, crouched low, like he was bracing for something. His clothes looked soaked, heavy. His face was pale beneath the brim of a dark hat, but it was his eyes that got me, wide open, unblinking, fixed somewhere just past me. And his lips, they were moving, whispering, or humming. I couldn't tell. I took a step forward and said, "Hey, are you okay?" Is wanting with all to us. He didn't turn his head, just flicked his eyes directly into mine. I stumbled backward, slipped on wet leaves, and didn't stop moving until I was halfway back up the slope. I didn't look back. Whatever was crouched behind that tree wasn't right. Not just the way he stared, but how still everything had gone when our eyes met. No birdsong, no wind. Like the woods themselves had been waiting. I hit the trail, breathless, heart punching at my ribs, and kept hiking north with no plan other than to put distance between me and whatever I'd just seen. I checked my GPS app once I felt safe enough to stop, but it showed something that made no sense. I was off trail, not by much, maybe a quarter mile, but still. I'd been following white blazes the whole time. I doubled back to where I'd seen the last marker, and there it was, plain as anything. Fresh paint on bark, then another, farther ahead. Too clean, too new. They led deeper into a ravine that didn't match the terrain on my map. I stood there with the app in one hand and the compass in the other, and for the first time since starting this hike, I felt properly lost. The sun dipped early behind the ridgeline. I couldn't risk hiking blind, so I pushed forward toward a structure I'd seen marked on an old, unlabeled topo map, a shelter long removed from official guides. Trail gossip called it Pine Hollow, though no one ever talked about actually staying there. I reached it by dusk. It was barely standing, wood gray and warped, roof sagging like a broken spine, but dry and still intact. No bare cables, no fire ring, just the hollow echo of my boots on the floor as I stepped inside and let the dusk close behind me. I lit a small fire in the center, careful to keep it low. My nerves buzzed like a second heartbeat. I ate the last of my granola, cradled the heat in my hands, and tried not to think about that figure behind the tree. The silence pressed in hard. To stay grounded, I pulled out my journal, mostly scribbles from the last few days, and forced myself to write, anything to keep my mind anchored. As I shoved my sleeping pad into a corner, my foot knocked loose, a floorboard. Underneath, I found something wrapped in plastic, a spiral notebook, weathered and thick with dirt. I flipped it open. The first pages were dated 10 years ago. The handwriting was sharp, rushed. The entries were all about a solo hike, much like mine. Then they changed. Mentions of strange markers, wrong blazes, a man seen crouching along a spring. One passage stood out. He only comes when you follow his trail, not the real one. His. My fingers went cold. The last page trailed off mid-sentence. Can't trust the paint. He paints over them. Yet at nod. The fire sputtered. Something creaked outside. I froze. Held my breath. Nothing moved at first. Just whined. I told myself. Just old wood shifting in the cold. But then I saw it. Through a crack in the shelter wall, barely 10 feet away, stood a man. The same figure. Hat low. Body rigid. Just standing. Not moving. Not even blinking. I doused the fire and crawled toward the broken floorboard. Beneath it, I saw a hollow space. Just big enough. I slid in, heart thrumming, pulling the loose boards back over me. The darkness was thick, suffocating. As I adjusted, my hand touched something. Fabric, then bone. I couldn't breathe. My fingers traced the shape of a collapsed frame, a body, mummified by cold and time, a backpack still strapped to it. I recognized the logo. It matched the pack I'd seen resting near the carved warning sign days earlier. There was another journal near the corpse, pages curled from damp. I could barely read the last entry in the dim light. You can't erase the blazes. He paints over them, follows the new ones. Once you see him, it's too late. That is a pinant. Footsteps above. Slow. Deliberate. Boards creaked under weight. Something sniffed the air. I didn't move. Didn't blink. Just stared into the dark. Pressed against the dead. The footsteps circled once. Then stopped. I could hear breathing. Not mine. Then silence. When I woke, it was light outside. Pale. morning gray. The shelter above was empty. No tracks. No sign of the fire. Or the man. I crawled out from beneath the boards. Numb. Packed up my gear like a robot. Brain fogged. Hands shaking. I hit the trail by noon, not caring which direction anymore. I just walked. 3 days later, a group of weekend hikers passed the same shelter. They found no one inside. No sign of me. But near the entrance, painted on the bark of a tree, was a single white blaze. Wet, dripping, angled east, into forest not marked on any map. When I came back to Hazard that fall, I didn't plan on staying long. 7 years gone, and nothing much had changed. Same cracked sidewalks. Same worn-out benches in front of the courthouse. My cousin offered me a few weeks at his place while I figured things out. I took it. The house sat at the edge of the woods behind my uncle's old property, a rust belt of land no one had touched since the coal company packed up and left in the 90s. The air smelled like wet leaves and wood smoke, and the ridgelines blurred into soft gray under low October clouds. Most days, I just walked, nothing ambitious. Half-mile out and back, maybe a thermos of coffee in my backpack. On the third morning, I pulled out one of my uncle's old topographic maps from the garage. He'd kept it mostly for sentiment, but something made me really look this time. In faint red pencil, just past the second ridgeline, was an X. I didn't remember seeing it before. Right beside it, in faded block letters, Hollow Trace. That name hit something old in me. I could still hear Uncle Don's voice telling stories at the kitchen table, leaning back in his chair with that haunted look in his eye. "Don't go past the second ridge," he'd said once, pointing toward the woods out back. "You'll come out where you didn't go in. Hollow Trace'll turn you around if you don't mind your steps." And he was not taken by. I figured it was just an old trail name, one of those that slips off maps but stays in mouths. I packed a bag, brought the map, and set out around noon. The trail was barely more than a deer path now, choked with briars and half-rotted leaves. But there was something about the quiet out there. It didn't feel empty. Just waiting. A mile in, the trail curved around a sycamore with bark like peeling paper, and that's when I saw it. A tin lunchbox, rusted and dented, sitting neatly at the base of the tree. Looked like something from the 70s, maybe older. Its hinges were crusted shut with oxidation, but it didn't look weathered by the forest. No leaves on top, no dirt around the base, like someone had just set it down and walked off. I knelt beside it, ran a finger along the latch, thought about opening it but decided not to. It didn't feel right. Instead, I stood and kept walking, the trail fading more with every step. The trees pressed closer together. The birds had gone quiet. After another hour, I found something else. A pair of boots. Side by side, in the middle of the path. Worn work boots. The kind with thick soles and steel toes. The laces hanging loose like someone had stepped out of them mid-stride. Damp but upright. Not toppled or buried. No footprints around them. Just packed earth and leaves. I kept moving. The unease was rising in my gut now, like a hand pressed flat against my back. Still, I didn't want to turn around. I wanted to know what was at that red X. Maybe just a story. Maybe a clearing. Maybe nothing. I passed a tree with strange marks on the bark. Long, tall slashes, about 6 feet up, carved deep in parallel. I marked the next one myself, using my pocket knife, just to see if I was circling back. But 20 minutes later, the lunchbox was there again, sitting on the ground just ahead, under a different tree this time. I hadn't turned around. I was sure of it. I picked up a stick and jammed it into the ground next to it, then walked another 100 yards, my heart pounding against my ribs. When I turned back, the stick was gone. So was the mark I'd carved. I stopped walking, listened. Nothing. No wind. No bugs. Just the weight of the trees. Then the fog started to roll in, thick and low, like it was seeping up from the ground. Within minutes, I could barely see 10 feet ahead. That's when I heard it. Boots. Slow. Deliberate. crunching through leaves behind me. I turned. Nothing but mist. "Hello," I called out, voice thin and uncertain. "Someone there. If you want a 10. Then he stepped halfway into view, maybe 30 yards up the path. A man, standing motionless. I couldn't see his face. Just the edge of a miner's helmet and the dark silhouette beneath it. He didn't move. Didn't shift weight. Didn't breathe, as far as I could tell. "Hey," I shouted. "You okay?" "It is recent." No answer. I took one step back. The mud slipped under my heel, and I went down hard, the map crumpling beneath me. I scrambled to my feet, blinking through the fog. The man was gone, and I was alone again, heart hammering in my chest, the forest silent as stone. I didn't wait to see if he'd come back. I turned off the trail and plunged downhill, half blind through the fog. Branches scraped my arms and caught at my pack. But I didn't stop. Not until the slope gave way beneath me and I tumbled, head over feet, into a gully thick with wet leaves and broken limbs. My ankle twisted under me on the last roll. I lay there for a minute, gasping, the taste of copper in my mouth. The fog was thicker down here, like it had pooled in the hollow, and the trail was gone behind me. I tried standing, but my ankle buckled. Sharp pain shot up my leg, and I dropped back down with a grunt. I wasn't going anywhere fast. The creek had to be somewhere downhill. If I could find it, I could follow it until I hit the old mine road or maybe a ranger's line. But dusk was already pressing in through the trees, and the cold came with it. I limped as far as I could, maybe 200 yards, before I found a rock overhang, wide enough to crouch under and dry enough to shelter me for the night. I cleared out some leaves, sat back against the stone, and tried to breathe through the pain. Made a fire with the emergency starter and what dry kindling I had left. The flames caught low and orange, flickering across the rock ceiling above me. I wrapped my ankle with an old bandana, braced it with a tent pole, and tried not to think about how far I'd wandered. That's when I saw it. Nailed into the underside of the rock was a small rusted tag, about the size of a dog tag, with a number punched into it, 921. It looked like an old miner's ID. Something about the number scratched at the edge of my memory, and I reached for the lunchbox, half thinking it might still be in my pack. But it wasn't. I'd left it on the trail, hadn't I? Then, I remembered, when I'd first tried to open it, the underside of the lid had a faint number carved into the metal. 4 digits. I hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now I was sure. It was the same number. The mine road had to be nearby. If I could just hold out till morning, I could find it. I kept the fire going as long as I could, then curled under my jacket and let the dark settle in. The animal sounds came back with the night. Soft movements, distant howls, the skitter of claws on leaves. Nothing close, nothing human. I don't know what time it was when I woke. The fire was out. The fog was thicker than ever, clinging to the ground like smoke. I couldn't see more than a few feet past the rock edge. Then I heard it. Footsteps, slow and steady, crunching leaves just beyond the light. Not wandering, not aimless. Pacing, closer, and then breathing, just outside. Labored. Deep? Not quite right. A voice came next, low and familiar, soaked in something that didn't belong in this world. "You see it yet? Thank you for watching." It was Uncle Don's voice. My whole body locked. He was dead. Had been 5 years now. I didn't move, didn't speak, just listened as the footsteps stopped inches from where I lay. I bolted, limping hard. I scrambled out from under the rock, half running, half crawling downhill. My hands tore on branches. My bad ankle screamed with every step, but I didn't stop. Not even when I saw the faint outline of a dirt road ahead. Not even when I heard the boots again. Running now, fast, chasing. Shapes flickered in the trees to my left. Dim, yellow helmet lights. 3, maybe 4 of them, bobbing between trunks like will-o'-the-wisps. But one was moving different, straighter, faster. It peeled off toward me, the light growing brighter. I stumbled. It tried to cut right off the path. A hand grazed the back of my jacket. I dove, half falling into the brush. My foot caught on a root and I slid down a slope, right into the hollowed belly of a fallen log. I didn't move, just curled in on myself and pressed both hands over my mouth. The footsteps stopped, right above me. Whoever it was didn't speak, didn't crouch, just stood there. Then, tap, 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 knuckles rapping gently on the bark of the log, like someone knocking to see if anyone was home. It went on for too long. Tap, tap, then silence. After another minute, the footsteps walked off, slow and steady again, crunching back into the trees. I stayed in that log till the sun rose. They found me 2 days later. The rescue team called in by my cousin when I didn't come back. I told them I'd slipped and gotten lost. Left out the rest. Who would believe me? Back home, I burned the map, threw it in the fire without a word, but I couldn't bring myself to get rid of the lunchbox. It wasn't in my pack when they found me, but 2 weeks later, it showed up on my front porch. No note, no markings, just sitting there like it had never left. Every October now, around midnight, I hear the same thing. Boots, crunching up the gravel driveway, slow, deliberate, never coming to the door, just pacing. The sign was rusted half to nothing, barely hanging on one bent nail, swinging in the late morning breeze. What was left of the paint read, "Road closed. No state maintenance." Calvin Ridge leaned out the driver's side window of his Jeep and grinned to himself. Snapped a photo with his phone, like he was collecting it for a trophy wall. The fire road beyond it was rutted and narrow, climbing into dense northern Georgia woods where GPS signals blinked in and out. But that's exactly what he wanted. Calvin was 35, recently divorced, and tired of hearing about how much he'd changed. Birmingham had become too loud, too predictable. He'd served 2 tours overseas, then buried himself in cybersecurity work. Quiet job, clean paycheck. But solitude had started to itch like a rash. Lately, he'd been filming solo trips for a small YouTube side channel, gear reviews, off-trail routes, what to do when, videos. This weekend was supposed to be a test run for a new ultralight shelter, plus maybe some good trout footage if the creeks ran right. He'd found the spot on a private forum, an old thread buried under years of dead links. Some guy named Crickwalker94 had posted a blurry scan of topo lines, hand-marked with circles and trout symbols, all just past an unlabeled valley called Dry Maw. Calvin cross-referenced it, found a fire road that wasn't even listed on Google Maps. That's what hooked him. Nothing got him out of his own head like the promise of forgotten ground. He parked when the trees got too tight and set up camp a half-mile downhill, near the sound of running water. Made a small fire. Cooked freeze-dried chili. Filmed a quick intro with his GoPro. Everything looked good. Quiet. No bugs. No other camps. But as he walked upstream the next morning, he noticed things that didn't quite sit right. A busted camp stove, half buried in mud. A thermal blanket pinned under a log. Still silver. Plastic wrappers untouched by animals. No claw marks. No teeth holes. Either someone left in a rush, or something scared them off. Then came the burlap sack, half buried near a cut in the bank. It looked like trash at first, but Calvin tugged it free and opened it. Inside, trail cams, at least a dozen, all snapped in half, the guts torn out. Some still had labels. One had property of USFS sharpied on the side. He took a picture, didn't touch anything else. Further upstream, he found wires. Thin, coated metal strung low between trees. Zigzagged like a lazy net, too low for deer, too irregular for fencing. Just there, waiting to snag a leg or catch the eye of anyone moving too fast. He ducked under them, unsettled, telling himself it was someone's old poaching setup. Still, he didn't stay long. Something in the air shifted. He packed up camp by dusk, planning to leave first thing. That night, nothing happened. No footsteps, no branches snapping, no odd noises from the trees. But in the morning, the Jeep wouldn't start. Battery showed full charge. Cables were fine. GPS unit was dead. 2. Calvin popped the hood, checked everything twice, then grabbed his radio and pack. He'd hike back to the nearest paved road, catch a ride, come back later with a tow. He wasn't panicking, just annoyed. Then he saw them. 2 sets of boot prints in the dirt beside his own, bigger than his, fresher. One set circled the Jeep. The other came from the woods and went back the same way. He didn't linger, hiked out with a faster pace, knife clipped to his pack strap, GoPro mounted to his shoulder, like always. He kept telling himself it was nothing, just locals playing games. Private property paranoia. He'd clear the ridge, get a signal, call a ranger. That's when the tree fell. It didn't groan, didn't crackle, just snapped, clean, like a deadlifted beam, and slammed to the ground less than 50 yards behind him. He spun around, heart racing, and before he could think, another sound cracked through the valley. Not thunder. A bullet hit a tree trunk just past his shoulder. Splintering bark. He hit the dirt and rolled, pain lancing up his arm as a branch sliced through his sleeve. He didn't wait to see who fired, just bolted, downhill, breath ragged, the thud of boots echoing in his head even if they weren't there. He reached the ridge, dropped behind a rotted log, and peered through his camera lens, zooming in. Shaky hands. 2 men stood 30 yards apart, dressed in full camo. One had a scoped rifle slung casually over his shoulder. They weren't searching. They weren't calling out. They were just standing, watching. I didn't move for an hour. The 2 of them didn't either. They just stood there, like they had time to burn and nowhere else to be. Eventually, one turned and walked off into the trees without a word. The other followed. That was somehow worse than if they'd searched for me. It meant they knew I wasn't going far. Meant they weren't in a rush. As soon as their footsteps faded, I crawled away from the ridge, sticking close to the creek. I moved at night, drank straight from the flow, let the cold keep me sharp. My arm throbbed, and my gear bounced unevenly from my shoulder. I knew how to mask a trail, followed my own shadow, stepped in water when I could, never left prints in soft ground. Didn't dare build a fire, just piled brush over a depression near a fallen tree and wedged myself inside, trying to disappear. It didn't work. Around 3 a.m., voices floated through the trees, calm, unhurried. "You lost, buddy," one of them said. "You need help," said the other. Too close, too casual. I didn't breathe, not once, just stayed flat, body stiff as stone, heart hammering in my ears like drum beats. They moved slow, never raised their voices, just let their words drift, knowing sound carried at night. At some point, they stopped speaking. I didn't sleep. I don't think they left. At first light, I moved again. The forest felt tighter now, trails where they shouldn't be, brush cleared in patterns I hadn't noticed before. I found an old trail shack, maybe a mile out, half hidden behind a curtain of vines. Padlock busted. Inside, it smelled like mouse droppings and mildew, but there was a cot, some full water jugs, a stack of hand-marked trail maps, and a CB radio. Dead. The maps showed the same fire road I'd come in on, but the valley was marked with a wide ink circle and 2 words beneath it. No sign. The cot creaked under my weight as I sat. I didn't unpack. Just rested. Waited. Told myself if I stayed put till daylight, I might have a chance to climb out. That's when I saw it. Through the cracked window, movement in the tree line. A figure, too far to make out details, but I could feel them watching. They didn't move, didn't shift weight, just stared. Then the forest went silent again. At dawn, I climbed. Every muscle ached, face tight with dried sweat and dirt, throat raw. I was bleeding from somewhere. I couldn't tell anymore, but I had one clear thought: get to the fire road. I heard an engine rumble ahead, faint at first. My legs kicked into a sprint, and I burst into a clearing half-blind with relief. There it was, a black pickup, parked silently, engine off. I ran toward it. Reached the driver's side. Empty. No keys. No movement. Tires still wet like it had just arrived. Then I heard the crunch. Before I could turn, someone slammed into me from the side, low and fast. We hit the dirt hard. My camera cracked against a root. I fought like hell. Training kicked in before fear did. Kicked. Elbowed. Rolled. He got one hand around my collar and the other toward my belt. But I twisted free. Just as I pulled away, his glove caught my cheek, and pain seared across my face. Barbed wire. He'd wrapped it around his hand. I ran, fast as I could, didn't care where. They didn't follow close. I knew that trick. They were hurting me, angling me somewhere. I dropped my gear as I went, tried to climb off trail, but the terrain narrowed. Then I saw it. Tripwire. A thin silver line stretched across a bend in the slope. I stopped inches from it, heart in my throat. Would have broken my leg, or worse. I stepped over it, kept running anyway. They say I stumbled out onto a gravel road mid-morning, barely standing. A Forest Service truck found me waving a broken radio in one hand and bleeding from the face. I didn't say much, gave them my name, then went quiet. When they asked if I wanted to file a report, I shook my head. Back in Birmingham, I sold every piece of camping gear I owned, shut down the channel, never looked at those trail maps again. But one file survived on my GoPro. All the rest were corrupted. Just one clip, 6 seconds long. It showed me asleep by the fire, 20 feet away. The camera was filming from the tree line. And every now and then, someone on Reddit posts a frame from it, zoomed in on the background, asking the same question. Anyone know what kind of rifle this is? All listen. We left Garen's Gap the night before my 7th birthday. Dad didn't say a word the whole drive. Hands locked on the steering wheel. Eyes fixed ahead. Mom cried the entire way, quietly, like she didn't want me to hear. I remember watching the tree through the rear window as we drove out, the one high on the ridge where the fog never cleared. It stood taller than anything around it, with one black iron ring hammered into its side, half swallowed by bark. No rope, no plaque, just the ring, rusted and thick like a man's wrist, clinging to the tree like it had grown there. I'd asked about it once. Mom shushed me, told me not to point at it, said it was for remembering. That never made sense until years later, and even now, it didn't make much more. I hadn't thought about Garen's Gap in over 2 decades, until I got a letter about my uncle's death. No funeral, no will, just a deed, a hand-signed note, and the key to a padlocked cellar. The land was his, and now it was mine. Some 10 acres in a crumbling farmhouse on the southern slope, right in view of the ridge. He hadn't spoken to us since we left. Hadn't written, but the letter was clear. If you're the one reading this, then you know the name. Randstad. I drove in from Raleigh, where I live now. I work in folklore archives, old papers, regional stories, newspaper fragments, church records, nothing that ever bleeds. I'd made a name for myself with a podcast series, No Folktale Without Fire. That's why I went back. Not because I missed it, but because I wanted to document the story. Garen's Gap was one of those places where names faded fast and people talked in half-phrases, and I needed to know why. The air changed as soon as I crossed the county line. The roads narrowed. Fog hugged the hills even at midday. The town itself, barely 2 blocks of old brick and sagging porches, was still there, though quieter now. I stopped in at the diner, ordered coffee, asked about the ridge. "It ain't your story to carry," the waitress said, pouring slowly, not meeting my eyes. That's what they all said. The house hadn't been touched in years. Dust an inch thick, mice in the walls, but the ridge was visible from every window on the east side. The tree still upright, like it never aged. Each night, the fog rolled down early, before sunset, and clung to the valley floor like spilled ink. I watched it from the porch, waiting for something. I wasn't sure what. My uncle's journal sat in a drawer by his bed, bound in twine. No chapters, no dates, just lines scribbled in blocky handwriting, with pages torn out seemingly at random. I read it in pieces, trying to piece together a rhythm. One phrase kept appearing, the names the tree remembers. Into nothing as enter. The cellar key burned cold in my pocket for 2 days before I used it. The door creaked like something trying not to wake. Inside, I found rows of old jars, sealed crates, a weathered cot, and nailed to the inside of the cellar door, a bundle of cracked name tags, not like modern IDs. These were older, thin plastic, the kind you used to see at logging camps or mining sites. Dozens of them, all first names, some illegible with time. That night, I heard it. Chains, faint, but close. Metal shifting against metal. I stood by the back door for 10 minutes, flashlight in hand, but nothing moved. The sound stopped as suddenly as it had started. I should have left then, but I didn't. Instead, the next night, I took my camera and hiked to the ridge. The trail was overgrown, but my legs remembered the path. The fog grew thicker the higher I climbed. My flashlight cut through it like a dull blade. When I reached the clearing, the tree stood just as I remembered. Massive, ancient, split near the base. The iron ring still jutted from the bark. But now, beneath it, someone had carved a name. June Weller. I stepped back, heart in my throat. The bark was freshly scored, edges still damp. I raised my flashlight again, and it flickered, then died. In the dim moonlight, shapes emerged around the clearing. Tall, silent, standing in a wide circle, just outside the tree's reach. I couldn't see their faces, couldn't hear them breathe, but I knew they were watching. I ran without looking back, tripped twice on roots, slid once on wet moss and scraped my palms raw. But I didn't stop. The shapes around the tree didn't move, not even a step. Yet the farther I got from the ridge, the colder the air seemed to press against my spine. It was nearly dawn when I got back to the house. Mud streaked to my knees, flashlight dead in my fist. I locked the door, drew the shades, and didn't sleep. By mid-morning, I went back up, not to the tree. I couldn't make myself do that, but just up the slope enough to get a clear view through binoculars. The ridge was empty now. Nothing stirred. I crossed the backyard and checked the bark again, half hoping the name was just something I imagined in fog and fear. But it was there. June Weller, carved cleanly beneath the rusted ring. That was the first moment I let myself feel afraid. Not of stories, of being remembered by something that shouldn't know my name. Back inside, I pored through town records, piecing together what my uncle had only hinted at. Mentions of culling rituals dated back nearly 100 years. Always vague, never reported officially. Some said the ring once held criminals for punishment. Others whispered about keeping the woods still and offering names during the last full moon of autumn. One line from my uncle's journal stuck with me like a splinter, one each cycle, not by force, but by knowing. Like the tree didn't take. It waited. That's when I met Cassie. She was maybe 18, eyes too sharp for her age. Found me in the library, said she'd heard what I was asking around about, sat beside me like we were cousins at a funeral. She told me her cousin, Tyler, had gone missing 5 years ago, just before the fog fall. Nobody searched long. No one asked the right questions. The name chooses, she said, then added, but the ring remembers. It not isn't. Cassie agreed to help me leave. Said she had a friend with a truck. We could make it out before the next full moon. We made a plan. She stayed over that night, and for the first time in days, I slept, deep and dreamless. When I woke, the house was silent. Cassie was gone, her overnight bag still on the chair, but my keys were missing. I stumbled to the cellar, half sure of what I'd find, and there it was, nailed into the inside of the door. Above the cracked tags, my own. June Weller, plastic worn, edges frayed, as if it had been there for years. I grabbed my boots, my jacket, and the flashlight. The fog was already spilling down the ridge by the time I stepped outside. I didn't wait. I ran. The climb was harder this time. My legs heavy, lungs burning. But the fear pushed me. I didn't think about what I would do when I got there. I only knew I had to stop it. The clearing appeared all at once, fog parting like curtains. Cassie stood beneath the tree, barefoot, lips parted but silent. Her eyes were wide and fixed on something far away. At her feet, the old chain lay in a loose circle. The iron ring in the tree glowed faintly, as if warmed from within. The figures emerged again, silent, closer this time. Not ghosts, not illusions. People, faces hidden behind bark-carved masks, each one shaped like twisted wood. They stood with hands at their sides, watching like they were waiting for a verdict. One stepped forward, voice dry and quiet. One each. The name chose. The fog takes balance. The end. I moved before I could think. I lunged for Cassie, wrapped an arm around her, and yanked her back from the base of the tree. Her feet dragged like she couldn't feel them. Something grabbed my coat from behind. I turned, and a bark mask slammed into my face. Hard. Splinters tore my cheek. I felt blood. I heard the breath of someone too close behind me. I fought them off. Kicked, swung wild, grabbed Cassie again and pulled her away. We tumbled down slope, half rolling, half running, the fog swallowing everything behind us, like it didn't want to let go. I didn't stop until we hit gravel. Cassie doesn't remember much, just the light in the ring and the sound of her name being whispered over and over. We drove out the next morning, never looked back. Garon's Gap faded into the rear view the way it always did. Quiet, fogged, watching. I burned the journal that night. But the story didn't end there. Every year, on the same date, just before the last full moon of autumn, a package arrives on my doorstep. No return address. No markings. Inside, a folded piece of paper. A name, handwritten. Never mine. I don't read them anymore. I just throw them in the fire. We weren't even looking for anything strange. Just a quiet weekend with no signal. Some trees. Maybe a few beers if we hiked far enough off trail. But I still remember the gas station. Not the snacks or the faded Coke machine or the map curled behind the counter, but the old man in the corner who looked up from his folding chair and said, "Don't cross the branch where the stream splits. Past that, it ain't for the living." The saying, he said it like a reflex. Not a warning, more like a habit. We laughed about it back in the car. Ben made some joke about hillbilly cryptids, and Tasha threw a peanut at him. Erin was already fiddling with her camera, filming the rust-stained window for B-roll. Marcus, of course, scribbled down the name of the stream. He said it wasn't on the map, which only made him more excited. There were 5 of us. Ben and I grew up together. He was the kind who always wanted a little more danger in his life, but not recklessly. Erin was a film student trying to go viral for documenting cursed places, but she never forced it. Marcus was the one who found the lead. A forum post from years ago, talking about an unmapped section of the Appalachian forest. Something about a split valley no one's charted. Tasha came for the trees. The silence. The disconnect. Me, I guess I came because I wanted to feel like I still belonged with them. We parked where the fire road narrowed into overgrowth, then hiked in. The air was thick with the sound of cicadas, birdsong, even frogs in the lower marshy parts. It felt real, simple. We crossed the stream just after noon, a wide, shallow break where the water split into 2 fingers around a thick cluster of rocks. I looked at it, remembered what the old man said, and stepped over anyway. After that, the forest changed. No more birds, no bugs, no sounds at all, except our own breathing and the crunch of boots in old leaves. It wasn't quiet. It was emptied, like the forest had ducked out and left us there alone. The markings were first. Strange carvings on the trees, circles trapped inside squares, upside-down arrows, diamond shapes slashed through the middle. They didn't look fresh, but they weren't worn either. Some were high up, far beyond reach. Then we noticed the ropes. thin, frayed lines. Some knotted, some looped, hanging from high branches. They moved gently, as if stirred by a wind that never touched the leaves below. Ben tugged one. It snapped. Aaron caught it on film. Marcus muttered something about symbols used by old trail cutters to mark danger zones. Tasha didn't say anything, just looked at the nearest tree like it might speak to her. That night, we pitched camp in a flat patch beside a dry creek bed, built a fire, opened some cans, drank until our nerves settled. Erin set up her tripod, left the camera recording the firelight. Ben stayed up the latest. I know because I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of leaves crunching. Not near the tents, off to the side, just a few steps away. I listened, holding my breath. The fire was still low and warm. I thought maybe it was Ben, wandering off to pee or pacing like he did when he couldn't sleep. Then Erin screamed. She'd grabbed the camera that morning to check the footage and found a clip none of us remembered filming. 2 minutes long. The camera had been set low, angled up through the brush. In the frame, all 5 of us asleep, zipped up in our bags. The shot never moved, but someone, or something, had been standing behind the lens, watching. We tried to laugh it off. Maybe one of us had played a prank, maybe a delay recording or weird camera bug, but no one said it out loud. We were all thinking the same thing. Someone had been close enough to film us without waking a single one of us. That night, the fog came early. By midnight, it was so thick we couldn't see past the edge of camp. That's when Marcus yelled, said he saw someone standing just outside the firelight. We all jumped up, lights on, voices loud. We followed the direction he pointed. The fog parted just long enough to show a figure, standing between the trees, motionless, facing us. It didn't move, didn't speak. We ran toward it, but the moment we reached the wide pine trunk where it stood, nothing, no footprints, no trail. And that's when we realized Ben was gone. 1 second, he'd been running beside me. The next, he was nowhere. We called for him. All night, circling further and further, lights dying one by one. The woods didn't answer. No movement, no sound. When the sun rose, it felt wrong, like it didn't belong here anymore. None of us wanted to say it out loud, but we all felt the same thing. Something had taken Ben. Tasha was shaking, her voice down to a whisper, fingers twitching as she tried to repack her gear. Marcus insisted we keep looking, wanted to hike further in, said maybe Ben had fallen. Maybe he was following something, but I could see it in his eyes. He didn't believe that any more than I did. Erin looked pale, withdrawn. She hadn't turned off her camera once since dawn, like keeping it rolling might somehow keep us safe. I wanted to go back the way we came. Retrace steps, follow the stream. Maybe we missed something in the night. We started walking, following the creek bed. Only now, it wasn't where we remembered it. The land was wrong. Slopes in the wrong place. Trees we didn't recognize. Like the forest had rearranged itself while we slept. Even Marcus stopped checking the map. The lines didn't match anymore. The compass spun without settling. So we tried marking trees. Notches in bark, orange tape on low limbs. But after a few hours, we ended up back in the same place. Same clearing, same broken branch, same set of footprints we left. The marks were still there. The path wasn't. Tasha started crying then. She said it felt like something was walking just behind her, breathing down her neck. I didn't say it out loud, but I'd felt it too. Just before dusk, we found the tent. Old, torn, sun-bleached in patches, like it had been there for years. The frame sagged inward, canvas shredded, but inside were signs someone had used it. Recently, a rusted pot, old food wrappers, pages from a waterlogged notebook tucked under a plastic tarp. Most of the writing was smeared, but one sentence still stood out. The ones who aren't chosen, stay. Brassing, we stayed in that ruined camp because we had no other shelter. Too drained to keep moving. I took first watch. Erin passed out almost instantly. Marcus sat against a tree, clutching a stick like it was a weapon. Tasha lay curled in the remains of the old tent. Eventually, I nodded off. Just for a moment. When I woke, the notebook was gone. And so was Marcus. No sound, no warning, just three of us again. We called for him, but not as long as we had for Ben. It felt heavier now, like we were going through the motions. Erin tried to keep filming, but her battery was nearly gone. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "I think it's watching through us." They were sold and extant. That night, we heard singing. Low, distant, coming from the trees. A man's voice. Not loud, not fast. Just the same few words. Over and over. In a language none of us recognized. Erin gripped my arm. Eyes wide. We followed it. Half because we were desperate. Half because we didn't know what else to do. The fog was thicker than ever. Then, suddenly, a light. Flickering, maybe 20 feet ahead. Erin hissed and pointed. It was her camera, propped on a broken log. Lens pointed directly at us. It was already recording. We stepped into the circle of light, and there, on the screen, we saw him. Ben, standing motionless. Back to us, just like in the footage from before. Erin called his name, stepped forward. That's when something grabbed her. A hand, from the edge of the frame, just outside the light. It seized her shoulder and yanked hard, dragging her sideways into the dark. She screamed once, sharp and real, then vanished between the trees. I chased after her, branches tearing at my face, feet slipping on wet earth. But there was no path, no trace, just trees. Then I saw it, a new mark, carved into the nearest trunk. A list of names: Ben, X, Marcus, X, Erin, X, me. No mark. Not yet. I don't remember how I got out. I was found days later, wandering along a back highway, clothes torn, feet blistered, barely speaking. They brought me in, asked questions. I didn't answer. No bodies were ever found. Just scattered gear. Erin's camera, a ripped jacket, an empty bag half buried in moss. Every October since, I get a package in the mail. Always the same, a faded paper map, hand-drawn, the same forest, the same stream. And each time, a new X appears, closer and closer to where we crossed that split in the water. I never open the door when it's foggy now. But some nights, I still hear footsteps on the porch, just standing there, waiting. Eli was already filming before I shut the Jeep off. He angled his phone to catch the mist curling over the ridgeline and said something dramatic about returning where no one dares go. I rolled my eyes and stepped out into the gravel lot. The air was thick with pine and last night's rain. Clean, heavy. The trailhead looked like I remembered. Narrow, crooked, a barely there, scrape through the brush that veered up and away into cloud-soaked green. Backbreak Ridge wasn't on any current map. Not officially. I hiked it once back in high school. Some extra credit wilderness test our outdoor club came up with. Steep, unmarked, and mostly ignored since a storm wiped out half the upper trail years ago. But Eli wanted off the grid, and this was as off as it got without satellite imagery. He called it perfect. I called it borderline irresponsible, but I figured I'd keep him close, keep it manageable. At the last gas station before the turnoff, an older woman had watched us from behind the register as we loaded snacks and cheap rain ponchos. When Eli mentioned the ridge, she muttered, "That ridge is slick this time of year. Someone went missing last fall." She didn't say it like a warning, just a fact. Eli grinned at her and said, "Perfect. We'll be the first back." I didn't laugh. The first few hours weren't bad. The lower trail had just enough structure left. Flat stone slabs, a few wooden steps barely holding on. We climbed steady, crossed two narrow streams, and stopped for water just past a mossy switchback. Fog hung low between the trees but didn't feel threatening yet. Eli talked the whole time. Into the camera, into the air, into himself. He had a kind of confidence that made you want to believe he'd be fine, even when you knew better. But after noon, the trail tilted harder. The rain from earlier in the week had turned the slope to slick clay and fractured shale. Every step sent grit sliding. We lost cell service just before a rocky bend with a clear view of nothing but fog. GPS froze. I tapped the screen, waited, gave up. Eli didn't seem to care. I cared a lot. It was just after 3 when we found the pack, torn, half covered in debris. Lying beneath a downed limb, I thought maybe it had rolled downhill, but there were no drag marks. No slope. Inside, the contents were soggy and bloated, a crumpled poncho, waterlogged trail mix, a journal with pages fused together. No wallet, no ID. It didn't look ransacked. It looked left. We camped early. I picked a shelf of dry rock just below the tree line. Trying to ignore the way the fog settled too fast and too thick, Eli made a small fire, cooked freeze-dried chili, and filmed a final check-in for his channel. He asked me to say something for the camera, but I waved him off. I kept glancing at the trees. Sometime past midnight, I heard it. Something brushing against the nylon wall of the tent. Slow, deliberate, like fingertips. I sat up, knife already in hand. "You hear that, Nat?" I whispered. Eli mumbled, "What?" but didn't move. I unzipped the flap quietly and stepped out. The fog swallowed the fire pit, the trees, everything beyond 10 feet. Then I saw it. A figure, standing between the trees, 30 meters out, still, watching. I aimed my light. It turned, walked away, silent, smooth, disappearing into the haze without breaking stride. I stayed up till dawn. We didn't talk about it in the morning. We packed in silence. Eli looked tired, but he never asked if I saw anything. The climb that day was tougher. The granite slope we reached by mid-morning shimmered with wet moss and bad footing. I anchored a rope to a dead stump and went first, inching across the slant with full tension in my arms. I told Eli to stay put until I gave the all clear. Halfway up, I heard it. A scream, raw and sharp. Eli's. I turned so fast I nearly lost grip. "Eli," I shouted. Nothing. I scrambled back, following the sound, feet sliding, found his rope, still tied, gear untouched. And a long, muddy slide, fresh, cut deep into the slope and vanishing into the mist below. I followed it. 10 meters. 20. No broken limbs. No blood. No voice. Just the wind. And fog. And nothing else. I searched until I couldn't walk straight. Down the slope. Across the hollow. Up into the pines. Then back again. Calling Eli's name until my throat burned, and my voice came out in a whisper. Every few minutes I stopped to listen, straining through the silence. Nothing but wind. No echo. No birds. It was as if the forest had absorbed sound altogether. By late afternoon, I found a smear of blood on a slick rock. Small, maybe from a scrape, but fresh. Next to it, Eli's bandana, tied tight around a branch, like a marker. That gave me a jolt of hope. He was alive. Or had been. I marked the area with stone and twine and circled out. No tracks. No calls back. Just that same gut-deep unease pressing tighter with every step. When I got back to camp, the fire pit was cold and my pack was open. Not ripped. Unzipped. My compass was missing. So was the map I'd tucked under my dry bag. I checked the perimeter. No tracks. No signs of intrusion. Just absence. I didn't sleep that night. I sat up with my back to the tent pole and a headlamp on my knee, watching the trees. That's when I saw him. Or something. A figure. Seated on a ledge above camp, just beyond the fire ring's reach. I stood slowly, turned the light up, climbed. When I reached the spot, it was empty. Not even boot prints. But there, in the dirt, was Eli's lighter. I turned it over twice in my hand. It wasn't wet. It wasn't dirty. Someone had placed it. The next morning, fog rolled in thick again. I pushed on. No trail to follow now. Just instinct and elevation guesses. Around midday, I stumbled on a fire service cache tucked in the hollow of a leaning pine. It was old, cracked, but sealed. Inside, a canteen, a thermal blanket, and a whistle on a fraying cord. The letters E.S. were etched faintly on the plastic. Not Eli's initials, but someone's. I thought I heard a helicopter soon after. Faint blades. Low and slow. I lit my second flare and ran to an open patch of rock. Smoke hissed into the air, but the sound never came closer. It faded like it had never been there. I stood alone in the haze, arm raised, until the smoke burned out. That afternoon, I pushed toward what I thought was the nearest service road. I was wrong. The slope gave way beneath me, and I tumbled, hit a rock hard, pain flashing white through my arm. My shoulder hung loose and wrong. Dislocated, I bit down on my shirt and shoved it back into place with a scream no one heard. Crawling now, I cut through underbrush, thick with brambles and spiderwebs. That's when I saw the boot. Mud-streaked. Heel. Buried. Eli's. I called his name again. Voice cracking. No answer. Just slow, steady footsteps behind me. I turned, raising a branch like a weapon. Nothing. Then I saw him. A man. Filthy. Face wrapped in cloth. Shirt torn at the shoulder. Hands heavy with something long and dark. He stood maybe 20 feet back. Still. Not hiding. Just watching. I threw my pack toward him and bolted sideways into a gully. Heart pounding. I slipped into a narrow rock crevice, knees to chest, and waited. My breath echoed loud in my ears. Then I looked up. He was standing above the gap, staring down at me. But he didn't follow. Eventually, he left. They found me at dawn, half-conscious, limping along a firebreak line, my shirt soaked in blood and rain. A trail crew radioed for evac. I remember their voices, the crunch of their boots, and the way one of them said, "He came off backbreak," like it meant something more than it should. The search for Eli went on for 12 days. They found the camp, the fire, even my trail markers, but no body, no boot, no lighter, no camera. I quit hiking after that. Haven't been on a trail since. I don't talk about it. Not with family. Not with friends. Because I don't have an answer that makes sense. Then, a year to the day, I came home to a small box on my front step. No postage. No note. Inside was Eli's lighter. Clean. Unused. And cold. The plan was Joey's, which meant it was half-baked from the start. Epic and empty. He'd called it. Some forgotten stretch of the Appalachians with no crowds, no cameras, no noise. Sam had agreed more out of family obligation than interest. He hadn't been on a real trail in months. Not since the burn season ended, and he took leave from the fire crew. He needed quiet. He didn't need Joey's brand of chaos. Or worse, Heather, showing up with her too-light pack, and that expression that meant she had something to prove. There were 4 of them. Sam, 33, the one who knew how to read a topographic map without guessing. Joey, 26, mouthy and overconfident, convinced every hike was a story waiting to go viral. Heather, 31, Sam's ex from a tangle of fire seasons past, sharp-tongued and stubborn. And Miles, Joey's friend, quiet, almost shy, with the kind of watchful stillness that made Sam uneasy even before they left the parking lot. At the ranger station, they checked in for the first leg of their route. A woman behind the counter flagged Joey's printed map and tapped a closed trail with her pen. Rockslide hit Deadfall Basin last year. Officially shut. No clearance past marker 11. Joey just grinned. That's fine. We're cutting off trail. It's still there. Just not on the map anymore. The ranger didn't smile back. By the second day, the trail narrowed, and the brush thickened. Thorns clawed at their packs. GPS flaked in and out, and Joey's confidence didn't survive the realization that the shortcut had erased itself under a season of mud and regrowth. Heather muttered curses under her breath. Miles kept glancing over his shoulder like he expected something to be following them. Sam said little, but he noticed everything. The signs of erosion, the drop in birdsong, the strange dampness in the air that hadn't come from rain. That afternoon, they found a shelter that didn't belong on any recent maps. It was low and warped, built from hand-hewn logs, half collapsed under its own weight. Inside were broken crates and old clothes, dustless in a way that made Sam's skin prickle. Someone had been here, recently. Heather stood outside, arms crossed, watching the tree line. Something moved, she said quietly. I saw it. Bozing great that. That night, the woods stayed still, but none of them slept well. Leaves rustled without wind. Something brushed against the tent fabric, slow and deliberate. Sam stepped out with a flashlight, scanning the trees. He saw a figure, tall, indistinct, standing between the trunks, just beyond the beam's edge. When the light caught it, it turned and walked calmly into the dark. No sound, no hurry. The next morning, Miles was gone. His gear had been taken, but his boots sat side by side near the dead fire pit. Joey cursed. Heather demanded they track him, but Sam said nothing for a long time. He was looking at the boots. They were dry, clean, like someone had placed them there, not removed them. They hiked deeper, shouting for miles until their throats burned. Midway up a ridge, Joey stopped suddenly, pale. A thin snare, wire stretched low and tight, nearly caught his leg. It was old, but not rusted. Man-made. Set clean. Sam traced the anchor point to a nearby tree, fingers numb. They made camp that night under low trees, wind whispering through dead branches. Nobody joked. Nobody filmed. Just before dawn, they heard breathing. Just breathing. Slow. Steady. Right outside the tent wall. No footsteps. Nothing else. When the sun rose, Joey was gone. His sleeping bag was zipped shut. His boots, just like Miles's, stood side by side. Sam found drag marks near the rocks. They led into the basin, then disappeared. Sam didn't waste time. He tore through the brush before the sun fully crested the ridge, following the drag marks as far as they went. Heather was behind him, still tying her boots when he found the first sign, Joey's jacket, nailed to a tree. The blade pinning it was wide, rusted, but sharp enough to split the bark clean. Sam pulled it free, stared at it. Not one speck of blood on the fabric. Heather caught up, panting, pale. Is this a joke? Are we being messed with? Sam didn't answer. He was scanning the trees. Every hollow, every break in the brush. He'd trained for wildfire traps. He knew what man-made disturbances look like. And this wasn't just careless footsteps. Someone had been planning, setting paths, choosing lines of sight. They tried to backtrack along a nearby creek bed, thinking it might lead them out quicker than retracing their climb. For an hour, it felt like progress. Flowing water, downhill slope, clearer air. Then they passed a torn blue pack snagged on a branch. Sam froze. It was the same branch they'd passed before. Same split in the rock. Same snapped fern. They'd looped. Heather started to cry. Fists clenched. Sam just stared at the trees. A dry bag sat half submerged in the creek. Weathered but intact. He pulled it out. Inside, 3 phone batteries. Each taped in place. All dead. None of them fit their models. They found a narrow cave by late afternoon. Shallow and cold, but dry enough to hole up. Sam set a few traps at the entrance. No illusion of safety, but something. Heather sat with her back to the stone, mumbling about Miles. He wasn't right. Maybe it was him. Maybe he planned all of this. Sam almost agreed. He wanted to believe it was just one person, something explainable. Then he found the carving. Low on the wall, half-shadowed, were initials scratched into the rock. J. Thank you, Fred. H. S. M. G. and S. R. All four of them, including Miles. Same letters. Same order. The edges of the marks were weathered, not fresh, like they'd been there before any of them had even arrived. In the morning, Heather stepped out to relieve herself and screamed. Sam ran out to find her hoisted 10 feet in the air, upside down, leg caught in a snare that hadn't been there the night before. She was bleeding from the ankle, tangled in wire, so thin it looked like fishing line. Sam cut her down fast. She hit the ground hard, sobbing. Then they heard it. A whistle. 2 notes. Low, calm. Not a call for help. A signal. They ran. Heather limped, clutching her leg. Sam half carried her through the underbrush. They didn't speak. The trees pressed in tighter. Somewhere behind them, leaves shifted. Slow footsteps, keeping pace but never charging. Sam turned once, saw nothing, turned again, and saw someone. Tall, dressed in black, face hidden behind a welding mask. The figure didn't move, just stood there, holding something heavy in one gloved hand. Sam didn't think. He grabbed a rock and lunged, swinging wide. The rock connected with something. It's hard enough to stagger him backward. But when he looked up, the figure was gone. They didn't stop running until the sun dipped low and the land began to level out. Sam stumbled into a logging road after dark, covered in scratches and blood. Heather wasn't with him. He didn't remember when they got separated. A trail crew found him just before midnight. He was incoherent, dehydrated, kept repeating the same thing. It wasn't just one, there were more than one. In the comedy terrages, they will down day presses, but all the round tapas. The search lasted weeks. No bodies, no signs, no gear beyond what Sam had on him. The official report cited weather exposure, outdated maps, unstable terrain. A year later, a couple hiking through a side trail near Deadfall Basin found a snare. It was clean, sharp, set with deliberate precision. Wrapped in the wire was a scrap of faded blue fabric. I hadn't been back to Clover Hill since I was 10 years old. The kind of memory that sits blurry at the edges. Sticky summer heat, the smell of dried herbs hanging from rafters, and my grandmother's hands always busy with something. My mother had stopped visiting suddenly that year, packed us up after one late August morning without much of an explanation. After that, the old cabin became a silent thing in our family, something we didn't bring up. Now, nearly 3 decades later, it was mine. I'd planned on a quick trip, couple days to clean the place out, list it, and leave. I wasn't expecting much, just dust and mildew and a few of my grandmother's odd keepsakes. She'd died the previous winter, and the house had sat untouched since. I figured it'd be quiet, peaceful. Even the place hadn't changed much, still perched on the slope like it was hiding from the road, tucked behind a mess of pawpaw and redbud. The porch creaked like it remembered me. Inside, the air was stale but not musty, like someone had opened a window not long ago. I found notebooks lined in her tidy script, bundles of dried yarrow, black cohosh, and tansy still strung along the ceiling beams. In the back bedroom drawer, under a patchwork quilt, I found the map. It was drawn in black ink on worn paper, yellowed at the edges. Bone Wash Path, it said at the top, and underneath, in my grandmother's hand, walk only once. That night, while sweeping under the kitchen table, I heard it, a low tapping from beneath the floorboards. Not mice, slower, more deliberate. I froze, broom midair. Then it stopped. I crouched and listened, heart hammering in my chest. Nothing. I stepped out onto the porch to breathe and saw her. An old woman standing at the far edge of the property line, just where the trees began. Thin, with long gray hair, wearing a heavy shawl despite the heat. She didn't move, didn't wave, just stared for a long, still moment before turning and walking back into the woods. The next morning, I stopped at the feed store on my way into town, just to ask if anyone remembered my grandmother. When I mentioned Bone Wash, The man behind the counter went quiet. The other customer stepped outside. "Ain't a path you should go walking, even if it is on paper," the man said finally. "Trail's dry for a reason. Is wrapped in." But I went anyway. The path started just past the old livestock gate. Overgrown, but unmistakable. 2 lines of stones shaped like worn-down teeth. It dipped steep, twisting through cedar and laurel, before opening into a clearing maybe 15 minutes in. That's where I saw them. Wooden frames lashed together like rib cages, hanging from the trees. They swayed gently in the still air, ropes creaking against bark. No wind, no birds. I didn't go further. That night, the cabin felt heavier. I double-checked the locks, sat by the fireplace with a notebook, tried to write but couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Just after midnight, I heard the front door creak. Slowly, like it wasn't being pushed, just opening on its own. I grabbed the fire poker and moved carefully down the hall. No one was there, but muddy prints, barefoot, small, tracked across the wooden floor. I woke later to a sound I couldn't place. Far off, somewhere in the woods, not quite singing, not a melody, just a low, rhythmic chant that pulsed like a heartbeat. I stepped out with a flashlight, my breath shallow. The woods were silent, but ahead, at the tree line, something moved. A figure, crouched low, skin pale in the beam of the light, scraping lines into the dirt with a sharp stick. When I called out, it bolted, gone in a blink of motion, but it left something behind. A pouch, leather, tied with twine. Inside, bones, tiny, clean. The bones were small, bird bones maybe, or rabbit, bleached white and warm, like they'd just come from sunlight. I placed the pouch on the table and opened my grandmother's journal again. The entries had shifted toward the cryptic near the end. Fragments between lists of tinctures and notes on weather. 1 walk, 1 keeper, 1 return, and another line, circled twice. When the bloodline bends, the path calls it back. It didn't feel like metaphor anymore. I tried to leave the next morning. The car wouldn't start. Not dead, just nothing. No click, no engine roll, as if the machine had simply decided to rest. I tried again, checked under the hood, everything in place. But the keys felt heavier in my hand, like they didn't belong anymore. That night, the figure returned, farther out this time, deeper in the woods, but holding something that didn't belong in the world of now. My grandmother's shawl, dark green wool, stitched by hand, the one she always wore to church and never loaned to anyone. The pale figure clutched it, then vanished without sound into the hollow. I didn't sleep. I waited for dawn and walked into town. Found the feed store again. The same old woman from the woods was there, sitting near the counter like she'd been waiting. She didn't smile, just said, "You shouldn't have followed the dry path. That's for the keepers." I asked what that meant, what I was supposed to do. She stared through me, then finally added, "If you don't finish the walk, it follows you. It's the in-text prize." I went home, map in hand, shaking. For an hour, I considered burning it all. The notes, the bones, the journal. Pretend it was grief. A rural ghost story. A crack in my city-raised nerves. But that tapping sound returned just before dusk, under the floorboards again. And when I looked out the window, the woods didn't look still. They looked patient. That night, I heard footsteps circling the house. Slow, dragging. Not boots. Not shoes. Bare, wet soles against dry leaves. I stayed frozen in the chair until something touched the window glass. I turned. A face stared back. It was mine. Younger, eyes too wide, mouth sealed shut with crude stitching, skin gray as bark. It tilted its head like a question. I didn't think. I grabbed the pouch of bones, the journal, and the flashlight, and I followed the path again. It was darker this time, shorter. The trees didn't creak anymore. They waited. The stones along the trail had shifted, closer together, pressing in like teeth. At the final clearing, I saw them, figures wrapped in shawls, the heads bowed, standing in a perfect circle beneath a dying canopy. They didn't move. In the center, a space stood open, just wide enough for one more. I stepped closer, breath shaking. They raised their heads. They all had my face. Each one, older, younger, different, but unmistakable. A family tree of borrowed flesh. Watching, expecting. I stepped into the circle. Weeks later, the county held an auction for the Harlan cabin. No will was found, just unpaid taxes and a mailbox stuffed with envelopes. A young couple hiking near the hollow found a pouch of bones hanging from a low branch on their way in. Inside, a scrap of paper, written in careful, familiar script. One walk, one keeper, one return. A wee problem. Back in town, someone asked the old woman at the store if she'd known the Harlan boy. She just shook her head slowly. That family always tried to leave. She said, never works. Yet as this.